Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. Yesterday, someone in the thread said, English is not my first language, can you please stop talking so quickly? And I've trained myself to speak really quickly over the last year and a half so that I can churn through more data and information on the videos. And he said, look, I've tried playing you at slower speed on YouTube, but you just sound drunk. So I suggested that I just get drunk for my next few videos and see how that turns out. Anyway, the reason I'm so late today is it was my mate's 50th birthday last night, and I spent most of the night sleeping on my lounge floor because my multiple sclerosis ridden body couldn't take that much alcohol, and I was in all sorts of trouble, and I'm still in all sorts of trouble. So I'll be speaking a lot slower today. I am so sorry for being about 4 hours late with all of my content. That is life. Just good times we had last night, but I'm not sure I should be doing that to myself again. Anyway, we'll go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. And my goodness me, the figures are high today. Certainly a lot higher than we've seen this week. There was a blip where we got up to, I think, 1,300 recently, but 1,250 personnel lost is a massive loss for the Russians. 19 tanks is huge. It's incredible to lose 19 tanks in a single day. And again, as I always say, even if you take 30% off these numbers, if you think, it's just propaganda, it's a load of nonsense, okay, take 30% off. It's still a bad day. Still a terrible day. 25 armored personnel vehicles, 37 artillery systems. So I'm wondering whether the skies were clearer yesterday, whether that allowed drones to get out there. There's a lot of footage coming through. I'll show you, or at least I'll reference a couple of bits of footage that kind of support this. There were some armored attacks, I believe, in Avdiivka, in Sinkivka, up in the very north, where and I think some losses around Mariinka as well. Certainly in terms of personnel, there's a video showing some of that. And I've partly these numbers will be represented by the Russians attacking. It's not the Ukrainians are attacking and causing the Russians these losses. These are the Russians committing military harikiri, as I often say. They attack and they lose a lot of equipment and personnel, although they do take meters. In fact, Reporting from Ukraine did a video. Their video last night was really good, giving you an indication of all the strikes that the Ukrainians have been doing over the last 24, 48 hours and trying to take out logistics, hitting command nodes by Avdiivka, so on and so forth. But they talked about 100 meter it was in Reporting from Ukraine. 100 meter tree line area by Stepova in Avdiivka, and they counted in just that 100 meters of tree line openly visible by drone, something like 50 bodies. So they're saying, look, if you're losing 50 bodies, and those are the ones we can see in a 100 meter tree line, multiply that out across that tree line. That's just that one bit of tree line. And the losses are pretty staggering in certain areas of the front line. And 37 artillery systems, that will be different from these, that won't necessarily be connected to the tanks and APV losses. That's going to be more emphasis on striking behind the lines with drones and counter-battery fire. As well, 3 MLRS and 4 anti-aircraft warfare systems. So these are bits of equipment, particularly anti-aircraft warfare systems we haven't seen over the last week or so. And to lose 4 anti-aircraft warfare systems is huge. 40 drones and 1 cruise missile, that's more likely to be from the night before. 56 vehicles and fuel tanks, again, massive numbers in that category. And 4 pieces of special equipment. So a really good day for the Ukrainians in terms of losses. Of course, what we don't know here is the losses, we don't know the statistics for the Ukrainians, of course, and they may have had a tough day themselves as well. Who knows? But certainly these are the kind of days that Ukraine needs for them to prevail in this war. When it comes to the statistics, the losses in terms of equipment from Andrew Perpetua, this isn't the most recent one. This was actually yesterday. It is a bit later than normal, so I didn't have access to his database or to his sheet. So this is yesterday's losses, which are pretty much at parity. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out in the next 48 hours regarding this, a reflection of these statistics. And there is already a number of new bits of footage that I've seen, and I'll show you a couple of them. Anyway, let's go into yesterday's losses here. The Ukrainians losing a lot of boats there. That'll indicate activity in the Krinky area. They'll want to minimize those boat losses. And unfortunately for the Ukrainians, that may also include quite a number of troops if those boats were hit and they were full of troops. Artillery piece, APC, MRAP, and the rest civilian vehicles, not too valuable in terms of equipment outside the boats. And even with the boats, it's difficult to know, the value of those. They have needed them. I mean, the replacement value isn't going to be particularly high, but it's the value to the Ukrainians. They were short on boats. They've now got a load of boats, and that's probably why you're seeing a lot more being lost, because they just have, they've been provided, I think it will be around 150 from self-funding. I think they're crowdfunding within Ukraine a whole bunch of boats, and they're now getting to the front line there. For the Russians, we have a piece of comm equipment, an excavator, but then quite a lot of tanks, T-72s, ATs, and other unknown tanks. BMP-2s there, no BMP-1s, as I've said before, and again, that still seems to be the case. It's a very consistent statistical scenario there, where we're just not seeing BMP-1s. And then this is Andrew's from today, but there wasn't much from when he did this earlier. When did he do this? So that's almost around, it's very early morning my time last night. So we have a drone, an RQ-20 drone for the Ukrainians, howitzer T-64 Ural, and for the Russians, old howitzer, some BMPs and BTRs and whatnot. So not too much to write home about, I guess. When we come to looking at visual evidence to support the kind of claims the General Staff are making, here we have the 46th OAE MBR mowed down a whole platoon of Russian paratroopers, the VDV, near Mariinka, according to PS11. The result is great, according to radio intercepts. So on this footage, this is mainly IEDs being dropped on trenches and whatnot, and it doesn't necessarily show a group of paratroopers being mowed down. So I don't know whether that's the wrong verb, whether this footage, this kind of montage actually does pertain to this claim, or whether it's associated. Anyway, there are radio intercepts apparently showing that this group had 6 casualties, or 6 dead and 17 wounded. And yeah, that's the platoon of VDV having a tough time in the Mariinka area. This is an interesting bit of footage where you see 2 vehicles, but there are also 4 vehicles that had already been blown up. And then on the right hand side of this screen, from down here, you see a javelin get sent up and come down, and this is full of you can see lots of troops on top of the BMP here, and that just gets blown up and they all fly everywhere. And then this one gets blown up. Actually, this one blows up first, and it looks like 2 top-down javelin attacks, but that's on top of the 4 vehicles already destroyed there. So I can't show you that, but all of these will be in the description below, linked in the description below. This is around Sinkivka, so where half of this column was previously destroyed. The Russians have been pressuring a lot on Sinkivka, but they've also been taking huge losses in terms of equipment there. It seems like they just try the same thing over and over, and I guess it's so difficult to this is what we kind of learned from the war, is that you're more likely to have an unmoving front line, because whenever you set out with any significant number of vehicles, you're going to be spotted. There are drones everywhere, and because there are drones everywhere, you just can't move without being hit either by the drones themselves, or they're spotting for artillery. And in the case of the Ukrainians, they're generally using more accurate artillery, both in terms of the barrel maintenance, but also the precision guided munitions that they have more access to than the Russians. And so the Russians are losing huge amounts of kit, but also the Ukrainians, when they tried this, lost a bunch of kit themselves in Malatok, Machka and whatnot. And then they've stopped kind of doing this kind of maneuver until they've degraded the Russians enough. But it's drones. It's all about drones, isn't it? And indeed, here we have a video from the 60th Brigade taking out a BTR, which had around 10 troops on top. Now, you don't see anything get blown up here, so there's nothing inappropriate, but you can imagine what happens. So this loitering munition, you can see all of these people are likely wounded, at least from this. This is a significant target and a good hit for the Ukrainians. Again, it just goes to talk about the nuisance that drones are for both sides. Of course, this is a problem for the Ukrainians as well, especially as there are theories that the Russians are outproducing the Ukrainians in certain drones. 6 Ukrainian border guards were captured on the border of Kursk region, according to Governor Starovoyt. Russian media are publishing footage of people in Ukrainian military uniforms who call themselves border guards of the 4th border post and say that they are considered deserters by their commanders. They claim they were captured after being sent to positions that commanders described as free of the enemy. The Ukrainian side has not confirmed this information. So, don't know about any further details of this. It could be that 6 Ukrainian border guards were captured by the Russians. And then Tim White here talking about Ukraine's resistance again striking in Mariupol, according to the former mayoral advisor Petro Andriushchenko published these screenshots from a video which he says was a car of the Russian military officer. The occupant is said to have survived but is in hospital. That is another piece of partisan activity behind the front lines. All right, moving on to standoff munitions, distance strikes and whatnot. Overnight, Russia attacked Ukraine with a total of 20 Shahed drones, 1 Kh-59 missile, which was shot down, and an Iskander-K, which wasn't shot down but didn't reach its target, according to the Ukrainian sources. We are seeing, consistently large numbers of drones being used on a nightly basis, and this has led Yuri Ignat here to say that supplies of drones from Iran to the Russian Federation are constant, so the intensity of the task of strikes on Ukraine is an indicator of the stocks of Shaheeds in Russia. Ignat noted that Russia recently used a record number of Shaheeds, 75 units that flew towards the capital. He assumes that today the Russian Federation will use more drones and fewer missiles, which is definitely what we're seeing. Certainly the last few weeks, I've been questioning what is going on with the Russians. Why are they not using any missiles, really? Why have we not seen these huge saturation waves of attacks, given that the Russians are supposedly stockpiling? And given that this would be the prime time to take out particularly power infrastructure, energy infrastructure, heating and whatnot, if that's what they're wanting to do again, since they did that last year and didn't quite succeed, one would expect them to do that again, stockpiling for the winter. Now, this is the time to do that. Otherwise, the worst of the winter will pass and they won't have struck. So, what is the reason that we haven't seen these missiles? And yet we are seeing Shaheed. So, one of the best explanations is that they somehow are unable to fire those missiles. Either they don't have the stockpiles or they don't have the firing ability, given the issues with moving the Black Sea Fleet from Sevastopol to Novorossiysk, where they don't have the loading capabilities for cruise missiles in that port. So could that have something to do with it? Or is Russia waiting for something stupendous? It just doesn't quite make sense. Anyway, you guys can let me know what you think. I have asked you that before, but it seems with every passing night and they're not sending missiles, you do wonder what is going on there. Russia has been pounding Kherson and Zaporizhia regions with even more ferocity over the last few days. These are from Zaporizhia, where 174 strikes on 21 populated areas, with 129 artillery shells hitting frontline towns and villages in the last 24 hours. yeah, it's pretty rough around these places. Kherson is routinely hammered, and indeed, here we have a hospital. Clearly a hospital here. So, Patrol Police of Ukraine published a video of a drone attack on a hospital near Kherson. The hospital in Stepanivka was attacked by the Russian drones on the night of December the 16th. Patrol officers and hospital employees were in the building at the time. War crime? Yeah, you'd think so. This is a medical facility. These are medical employees. So 2 strikes there. There were 2 drones that hit. And they go out into hospital area to look around, and, so the video goes on. It's just, hitting hospitals with drones. It's not cool. It is not cool. Odessa was hit. There were drone attacks there. As Tim White says, as I reported last night, there was an explosion in a residential area. A drone was shot down and it crashed down onto a house, killing the occupant. So this is a problem. As I always say, what goes up must come down. And even if you are taking out these drones, the explosion often still happens on the ground, just not at the targeted area. So this is some poor person's residential house. Other houses and a sports facility nearby were also damaged. These carry significant punches, these drones, and the victim's body was pulled from burning ruins of a house in the south of Odessa. Photos of the fire at the height show the terrible task facing rescue workers. And there we go. And that's the sports facility, which is completely burned down. Sports club. Pictures of a sports club's warehouse, that was. Okay. On the other hand, the Ukrainians have been doing a really good job of hitting, or at least striking at, targets within Russia. It's difficult to know how much success they have or haven't had. The Russians claim to have shot down everything, which is kind of usual. So this is Taganrog in the Rostov region. This is just over the border. So you think Mariupol down on the Sea of Azov. If you keep going to the east, you'll get to the Russian border. And then the other side of that is Taganrog. That is a staging point for quite a lot of logistics for the Russian army as before it gets into Ukraine, and it looks like the Ukrainians have been targeting particular objectives in Taganrog. An oil depot currently burning in a Russian-controlled Budyonivsky district of Donetsk. So a couple of, as I said yesterday, a couple of oil depots have been hit there. And reporting from Ukraine talked about how there have been some command nodes for the Avdiivka area hit by the Ukrainians. HIMARS have struck oil depots, and that there is this fear from the Russians that they are going to have a lack of fuel for some of their frontline activities, so on and so forth. So this is all looking very very coordinated. Hangar with 2 tons of Freon is burned at night on a Murmansk sea trade port in Russia. I don't know what's going on there. Russia on fire, bit careless, or whether that is sabotage, who knows. And this is the big one from last night, I think. And again, I don't know the details of damage, other than at least one plane was damaged, and we'll come to that in a second. So Russian media reported a drone attack on the Russian Morozovsk military airfield in the Rostov region, and it is reported that military airfield where Su-24, Su-24M and Su-34 bombers are based was attacked in Mozorovsk, Russia. The Russian Ministry of Defense claims the Air Force shot down all 35 drones that attacked the Rostov, Volgograd and Lipetsk regions. In other words, there was a significant wave of drones attacking a number of different places inside Russia last night. And one of them was this airbase. Now, there's some footage that come out today that allegedly show the photos of a Su-34 bomber damaged by an unknown drones at the Morozov aerodrome in Rostov. Message on the drone says, "Greetings to Katsaps from Yarek," to Yaroslav. So it's obviously someone writing a message on the drone that here did damage to this this Su here, but you can't see anywhere else on the Su, so you don't know, what other damage there might have been, and as well, you don't know other stuff happening around the airport. It's just there's a lot of unknowns, and it would obviously be good for the Ukrainians if this caused a lot of damage to a number of different airframes, but you just don't know at the moment. Or perhaps it's just slight damage to one airframe, as indicated there. But we'll keep looking for evidence of last night's strikes, as they seem to be fairly significant. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces. This is from PS11. So what Russians can't do, migrants did. So more than 80 migrants attacked the police in Moscow. According to shots, security services tried to detain a driver who allegedly dragged a policeman on the hood for several meters. A few minutes later, the offender beat the policeman. Later, a crowd of more than 80 people approached them and began pushing the police officers. As a result, they had to fire 2 shots into the air. A total of 82 people were detained. Unprecedented raids on migrants have been taking place in Moscow recently. Military registration and enlistment officers massively organised one-day conscription, sending newcomers from other regions to the army. So, yeah, this idea that migrants are being targeted, illegal and legal, for potential conscription into the armed services. And here it appears migrants aren't happy. I don't know whether they're not happy about that, but it's when you start seeing this kind of activity against the services, the internal security services in Russia, this can only be a good thing, because that kind of discontent might spread and it might give people permission to do it elsewhere. So you would expect the internal security services to come down really heavily here, to just be a message to everyone else, like, don't even begin to think about this. But so, yeah, for so long we've been wanting, pro-Ukrainians have been wanting to see the Russian population get up in protest about the war, about Putin, but yeah, they've got, the security services have such a strong handle on things in Russia that you begin to do that, you end up in a gulag, right? So we'll see where this goes and just hope for the best. We'll hope for mass Russian discontent. It's interesting that at the same time as there was that big telethon, there were some vox pops of people on the street. I know I didn't show this to you, but people were, and they blurred out all the faces, asking them about, what are their biggest concerns. And all the ones in the montage were talking about end to the war, is Putin still ruling? This kind of like idea, some proper views about, that were pretty unhappy with the war and Putin. And so you wonder in society at large what people really think in Russia. Anyway, moving on. Ukraine put the head of Russia's Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, on a wanted list for abetting war. Now, he is former KGB himself. He's not a nice human being, is my conclusion. He's been a long-time supporter of the Kremlin's war against Kiev and accused foreign forces of trying to divide Russia and Ukraine. I mentioned this yesterday. Ukrainian armed forces do not consider it a priority to retake territory and defend the current front line. So in my frontline update with James yesterday, I talked about this, how you shouldn't be too worried about Ukraine ceding territory to the Russians in this period of a Russian offensive, or whatever it's going to be over winter, but it won't be a Ukrainian offensive. Don't worry about territory, because even though territory is the main goal at the top, you have these other sub-goals underneath that are more pressing than that main goal. That will happen if you get all of these other things in place. So all of these other goals beneath are the degradation of the Russian armed forces of personnel, degradation of the Russian air defenses, degradation of the Russian equipment in general, strikes on logistics, strikes, oil depots, ammunition, air bases. All of these things need to happen before they can go, and now we're going to take territory. So they can cede territory for the time being, as long as they're achieving these goals just below that main ultimate goal. And these goals will then necessarily lead on to that main goal. And one of those goals will also be not losing their own troops. So while doing this, they'll have a goal of not losing their troops. So you can give up territory because you don't want to lose your troops. You need, especially in this time when the mobilization is a challenge for the Ukrainians, they need to save as many lives as possible so that they can commit those troops to a future counteroffensive. Defending till the last man a certain trench line or tree line is not important. Those lives are more important. And so, give up a field here, a field there, maybe a settlement here and a settlement there. It's going to be kind of working out a sweet spot of not just running away full stop and allowing Russia to have everything. You still need to defend, but it's this idea that territory at the moment is not the most important thing. At the moment, the main goal of the armed forces is to minimize losses, according to the German publication Bild, who quoted sources in the Ukrainian army as saying. And that I would agree with. Okay, so now a significant number of buildings in Mariupol are still not connected to heating systems. So in Ukraine, they often have centralized heating systems that connect entire blocks or neighborhoods to like a state-run heating way of heating, and it's just the most efficient way to heat these places that get super cold in winter months. Now, in Mariupol, they've still not connected many of the buildings to the heating system, and Russia have now been in control of Mariupol for however long they have been, and it's still not been sorted out. Consequently, residents are freezing in their apartments, according to Ukraine's National Resistance Center. So there is ruined critical infrastructure in the city because the Russians blew it up. Well, now it's your city, according to you. What are you going to do about it? Not an awful lot, or not enough. And this is a problem that Russia has, is they, when they take places like this that involve huge, heavy bombardments, then they gain control of that, and then they have to pay to fix all that stuff that they've just blown up. And yet, at the same time, they're trying to pay a gazillion spondulis for the war effort. And actually, these citizens in Mariupol won't be as important as citizens, say, in St. Petersburg. And so, is this really what the Ukrainians who would have been pro-Russia would have wanted? Would they have wanted their cities to have been blown up and occupied and ruled by the Russians, but then, popped down the list of priorities? And then the Institute for the Study of War here says it does a little bit of analysis on the Russian Black Sea Fleet. So what does it say? Ukrainian strikes against Russian Black Sea Fleet assets, so BSF assets, have changed Russian naval operating patterns, causing the BSF to move some ships away from its main base in occupied Sevastopol and hampering its ability to interfere with maritime trade in the western Black Sea. So the trade route is unhampered by the Russian Black Sea Fleet because it's not so operational from Sevastopol. Ukrainian strikes have likely caused the BSF to set conditions for a more permanent basing pattern along the eastern Black Sea coast as it transfers naval assets away from Crimea and expands a small port in de facto Russian-controlled Otchamchira in Abkhazia. So this is the port that they're trying to build in Georgia, in annexed area of Georgia, because that's what Russia does. It just goes around the world nicking bits of territory and annexing it and then calling it theirs. But of course, if we allow them to do that, then they will continue doing that. It's so important to stand up for Ukraine and Ukrainians because actually we're standing against that kind of aggressive imperialism. We didn't do anything about Georgia. We did very little about 2014 Crimea. So we need to stand up now. Ukrainian strikes against the BSF assets have successfully facilitated the use of Ukraine's Black Sea grain corridor, as international support for the corridor continues to increase despite Russia's withdrawal from the Black Sea Grain Initiative and military threats against it. So that is interesting assessment there from the ISW. And finally, this. Now, this is an idea that has been touted for quite some time, and I talked about this probably a year ago now, and I was like, I'm not sure. I think so. I did advocate this at the beginning, and then I was like, I'm not really sure, and now I might start re-advocating it again. Question is, why is the US But there's so many sort of counter arguments and things to do with like issues in Congress and everything. But why has the US over time slow rolled equipment to Ukraine? And one of the theories has been because Lloyd Austin literally said it in April time last year, I think it was. He said, we need to thoroughly degrade Russia so that they can't do this for for the next however many years or generations or whatever. So very explicit messaging to say that the US or allies of Ukraine need to fundamentally degrade Russia. And you can't really do that in a quick war. You need to do that in a slow war that bleeds Russia dry and degrades their capacity hugely. What is it as cynical as that? Well, let's have a look to see what Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, says.
I think it also may be the case that he would love to see the war end sooner. And that's because I believe that Russia is putting on a braver face about how well they are weathering all of this than the reality suggests. And frankly, the coalescing conventional wisdom in the West is, oh, this is all just fine for Russia. I don't believe it is just fine. They are bleeding men. They are bleeding money. They are driving growth, but that growth is entirely the production of more armaments to send to Ukraine to gain no material territory on the battlefield. And so the pressures of occupation of a foreign land that does not want you there are real, and they only grow over time. I think it also may be the case.
So, I mean, I don't know that definitely does do what Trent Selenko says. Well, now that explains the slow rolling of aid to Ukraine. Velina Chakarova says Sullivan reveals unintentionally that the US point of view of bleeding Russia is actually the goal. But there's a very big difference between bleeding and collapsing Russia, which the US obviously doesn't want to happen. I don't know that you can definitely get that out of what he says here. I don't know that he says it's also the case that this is happening. Is not to say that this is their intention by not giving aid quickly enough. So I'm still kind of like, I'm not really sure about that, but I'll be interested in what you guys have to say. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Sorry it's so late today, and I think I need a cup of tea. Take care, everybody.